Hey! There's a lot that has been said about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. In many ways, it far exceeded audience expectations and set a new bar for what animated movies can do, who they can appeal to, and the general public's idea of what they are. Its beautiful art and animation breathes life into DreamWorks' previous tired photorealism by pushing proportions in the character designs, fostering a skillful and plentiful use of vivid color, and getting creative with movement and posing, both in the moments that Puss behaves like an actual cat, and the fight scenes that display clear inspiration from the forever legendary and innovative animation of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The trend of pushing for more stylized designs inspired by comic books, clay, and paintings over photorealism has brought forth a new wave of beautiful animation that showcases what the medium is at its best, things that can't be accomplished or conveyed within live action, and what an absolute treat it is to see animation at its very best during this film. But the excellence of artistry on display here reaches far further than that. The story of The Last Wish is one of universal relatability. Death comes for all of us. Some people face it before their time, some outrun it for as long as they can, but it is an inevitability for every human on the planet. Creating a villain in death was an incredible move by the writers of this film. Most adults are not scared of a regular villain. While some of Disney's best villains like Dr. Facilier, Scar, or Mother Gothel may instill fear into the hearts of children watching their films, the adults see things from a more wizened perspective, a stronger knowledge of the gray areas in life, and the stakes are in return more trivial. However, death for many of us as adults is a constant. Something we are keenly aware of every time we travel, commute, or say goodbye to a friend or family member. The driving force behind "text me when you get home," and "I hope you know how much I love you," something we see all around us as we grow up. Once you experience your first run-in with death and grief, you start to see it everywhere. It feels like it comes in waves, more frequent and unfair with time, and the inevitability of your own demise dangles in your face, for some instilling fear, and for others bolstering a desire to live every day to the fullest and give love everywhere you can. I think Puss in Boots: The Last Wish understands this better than any movie released in recent memory. This is Pick It Up, Puss in Boots and the Will to Live. The Shrek franchise has always been close to my heart. Smash Mouth all-time greatest banger aside, its themes of misfits finding community and embracing your true self resonated with me as a young person, and the first movie was possibly the most played DVD in my house. I even met my first group of real internet friends through modding a Shrek memes page that was so big, DreamWorks took it down. Here's a goofy Photoshop I made in that era. At this point, I have basically every story beat of Shrek memorized. That being said, I admittedly fell off following the franchise sometime around Shrek 4, and I had refocused my interest on other things. So with that in mind, a sequel to a spin-off of a sequel was the last thing I expected all my friends to praise. But then that happened. I'll be honest and say that the beginning of January was a very tough time for me. So when I went to see Puss in Boots: The Last Wish in theaters by myself, it was at the end of one of the lowest weeks of my life. I desperately wanted to get out of my house and forget the headspace that I was in for a few hours, and I figured this would do the trick. All I expected was something fun to make me laugh and take my mind off of things, but instead I got the exact message that I needed to hear to pick up the pieces of my life and move forward. I've dropped hints and anecdotes throughout my video essays about what my life was like growing up. I've purposefully never gone too into detail, as I think some things should stay protected, but going through the things that I did as a child will leave you in a less than optimal state for handling adulthood. Due to those circumstances, I've spent most of my life grappling with a loud and overwhelming case of depression, constantly in fight or flight even when I didn't want to be, running from difficult situations and avoiding facing my own reality. And while I have definitely grown a lot as a person since my early 20s when that was a huge problem for me, it definitely still has been something that I struggle with as I continue to grapple with my trauma. And while his demeanor and bravado tell a different story on the surface, I think Puss in Boots as a character faced some of those same things. He knew he had died before, but never kept track of how many times. Whether he was in denial or truly unaware of the consequences of his fearlessness, I'm not sure. But in that theater, in the moment when he was made aware of being on his last life, I knew that this movie was going to be deeper than I had anticipated. Puss lives his life up until the events of the movie as if he is immortal. 9 lives is so many. Why should he have to worry? And why would we worry about him? That is the sentiment expressed as the story begins. Puss is fearless, a show-off and a performer loved by the people everywhere he goes. The first scenes of the movie illustrate the boisterous vigilante cat in a comedic presentation, requesting his theme song played in double time as he battles the owner of the mansion he's taken over and the sleeping giant of the town in a gorgeous, epic sequence that really kicks this thing off with a bang. And this setup is the perfect precedent for a bait and switch that I don't think anyone saw coming. This bell drop and the resulting news drop that Puss is on his last life puts the audience and the titular character in an unprecedented situation. The stakes are incredibly high. Any new challenge or battle that comes Puss's way could be his last. So to hear him say Puss in Boots laughs in the face of death as he meets this hulking bounty hunter many times his size, and to then see him shed a single drop of blood as a result of their fight, is such a terrifying spike of adrenaline. And when Puss's hair raised all over his body, mine did too. The wolf is one of the most terrifying villains ever written for the screen. His double sickle wielding, his overbearing stance, his oversized grin and red eyes, his eerie death whistle, it's an incredible character design even before the grand reveal of his true role. Puss's monotonous and isolating temporary retirement at Mama Luna's home drives him to a depressive, listless apathy. What good is having this one last life if his lust for life and adventure, the things that make him who he is, are ripped away from him? The promise of the last wish, a way out of his predicament, pulls him out of this hole and sends him on the most important quest he's ever had, a quest to save his own life. Now, we don't need to talk through the story beat for beat, as I don't usually find much value in that, and I think this movie is definitely worth watching on your own. But I will say that the highlights for me are the beautiful designs of the dark forest, the therapy dog scene, and the healing that happens between Puss and Kitty Softpaws as the story progresses. They're such an adorable pair with a bittersweet history, and to watch them slowly begin to trust each other again was very touching. This scene in the Cave of Lost Souls was especially gorgeous. I dare to say seeing them reconnect gave me some perspective on relationships in my own life. Didn't expect that from the cat movie. I loved basically every scene I saw, from the cats realizing their empathy for Perrito, to the 8 past versions of Puss in the Cave of Lost Souls, to the Goldilocks family resolution. But the moment that really pushed things over the edge for me, and made me want to make this video, was the fight scene in the giant wishing star, and I think a lot of people may have felt the same. Puss has been running from the concept of death the entire movie due to the bounty hunter's chase. His entire quest for the last wish is him chasing an easy fix for his predicament of being on his last life. His fleeing from death only becomes more intense at the reveal of the bounty hunter's true nature. And my god, the expressions in this scene are masterful and heart-wrenching. When Puss and the audience learn the wolf's true motivation, to exact revenge on Puss for taking his first 8 lives for granted, for laughing in the face of death metaphorically and literally, the stakes are thrilling and horrifying. By this point in the movie, the tears were flowing for me, and they had been throughout, at the absolute marvel of animation that I was seeing, at the optimism for what the future of animation could be, but I felt that stress and fear that Puss felt to my core, and I felt my own mixed pool of emotions at how little value I placed on my own life at that point in time. How often throughout my 20-something years of existence that I'd wish to hear that whistle rather than fighting for my own life. When Puss abandons Kitty and Perrito due to his fear of death, running towards the star without them, it's not because he suddenly doesn't trust them at his core, but because being in a state of fight or flight makes you completely irrational. Anything you feel for the people in your life can be overridden in that state. You're barely in control of your actions. Puss's fear and desperation to escape the situation overcomes all of his love for Kitty and Perrito, and his fear and panic about the situation makes it very difficult for him to open up to Kitty and tell her what's going on with him. This is a reoccurring experience for people who are traumatized, and I'm so impressed and enamored at the nuance with which the entire topic of Puss's anxiety, fear, trauma, and panic was handled, even in small moments like this. And now, the scene in the wishing star. One of the most beautifully lit, framed, and blocked scenes in animation. Evocative of the gorgeous and mind-blowing Super Collider scene in Spider-Verse. From each character's entrance, to the pivot from their battle, to their unification against Jack Horner, It's a stunning piece of visual storytelling. I could look at the purple crystalline hues of this scene all day, and in the moment, in that theater, I was truly glued to the screen, an absolute emotional mess. And then, Death himself issues that haunting whistle, and one of my most cherished moments in modern media begins.
You gonna take the coward's way out, or you gonna fight?
Against a hellscape of pink flames, Puss in Boots is once again face to face with death. The thing he spent the entire story running from, desperately trying to escape, trapped with no way out but to fight.
Pick it up. Go on, pick it up.
Do you want to know why I called this video Pick It Up? It's this scene, and everything that the phrase represents. When Puss answers the call and picks up his sword, he makes the decision to fight. He realizes the beautiful life right in front of him, the thing he's been running from all this time. All the people he's loved, and the connections he's made, and the things grounding him to this last, 9th life worth living and fighting for. And in that moment, sitting alone in that empty theater, quietly sobbing at this movie that I had thought was made for children, I decided I was going to pick it up. I decided I was going to stop running away, being angry at my past circumstances, and wishing for a way out. I knew that this movie, and the decision I made to go see it that day, was serendipitous, that someone out there knew that people all over the world needed to see a symbol of strength and resolve that they could relate to when they felt all was lost. That I desperately needed to see someone on their last leg stand up and fight for their beautiful life, and that I should too. Didn't expect that from the cat movie. In that moment, when Puss opens his eyes, tears falling down his face, after envisioning all of his reasons to live, and picks up his sword, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish touched my soul and became one of my favorite movies to ever grace the screen. And though it doesn't hit quite the same on rewatch a month later, now that I'm not hearing that wolf's whistle in my quiet moments, I'll always be grateful for what this movie did for me that day. Because I think it might have saved me. I really do. The fight scene is truly stunning stuff. My favorite moment is the gatito blade stabbing Death's sickle, a symbol of Kitty and Puss's love for each other, and his relationships with his loved ones sustaining him in this moment of need.
Pick it up. I can never defeat you, Lobo, but I will never stop fighting for this life.
The face-off when Death realizes Puss is no longer taking his life for granted is incredibly intense and moving. And the rest of the movie is a beautiful, satisfying, wonderful conclusion to such a good film. I adore this movie, truly, and I hope we get to see more modern animation move in this direction and dare to tell such impactful and universal stories. And if you're struggling, pick it up. Just try, just for today. See what happens when you fight back, and you'll thank yourself in a month. In a year of so much pain in the animation industry from its workers and for its fans, seeing show after beloved show get axed, to see Puss in Boots: The Last Wish release at the end of 2022 and be exemplary of the very best the medium can offer, and perform so well critically and in the box office, is a breath of fresh air and a collective sigh of relief. This movie cements the thing that you and I have known for a long time now. Animation isn't just for kids. It's a medium accessible to everyone. Thank you so much for being here with me right now, and for watching.
I am the queen of the universe, the way it's hard.